Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for attending this Excel session today where we're going to look at Power Query and how you can import multiple files in a single query, basically. So this session follows on from the one last week, which was an introduction. This one is going to look sort of at different things rather than building on what we learnt last time. So now the materials, you need to download the materials. So I'll drop the link in the chat screen again. And this is what the zipped folder looks like. So it's a zipped folder with a folder at the top. The PDF manual, it's worthwhile printing that out. And also that's the Excel file that we're working with at the moment. There is a folder called PQ underscore examples. If you open that up, there's a whole lot of stuff in there. You need to put that folder on your system somewhere. So I've put it on my desktop. So if I get rid of this one and bring this one in. So this is my desktop and PQ underscore examples. So that's a folder on my desktop and we're going to have a play around in here. So there's quite a number of folders where we're playing around with CSV files as well as some Excel files. And I'll explain those once we get there. Okay, and the session is being recorded, so I'll get the link out to you tomorrow. About this time it goes out. I'll also upload this to my website. So this is the third free session I've run this month. And I am putting those ones up on my website so that you can look at them without any login or sign up or anything like that. These are two topics and three videos that I think are really important for accounting and finance staff. So I just want to make it available out there on it's on my A4 accounting website. So last session, last Thursday, that's up there. And the one before that, which was on tables, is up on my website as well. There is a feedback form on the way out. So if you could fill that in, that would be appreciated. Okay. Let's dive in. Now, Power Query is dedicated to converting data into a table format in Excel, and which makes it really easy to use with pivot tables and also formula-based reports. We're going to focus on bringing in multiple files. So the session last week looked at individual files, but you can also bring in multiple files in a single query. Now, I looked at a lot of data cleansing sort of topics in the last session. This session isn't really going to be doing much data cleansing as such. It's going to be more focused on all of the things involved with bringing in multiple files. But you can do them both. Like you can bring in the multiple files and then do the data cleansing. But rather than get them confused, I'm just sort of separating them so you can see how to do it. We'll be working with CSV files initially, and then we'll work with some Excel sheets and files. We're going to use the filter and sorting a little bit more in this one. We didn't really do any filtering and sorting in the previous one, and so you'll see how you can do that. Now, the folder we're going to be working with, as I mentioned, is called PQ underscore examples. The initial one we're going to look at is this data folder, and that has a subfolder of 2015. So you can see how long I've been running these training on Power Query. It's been around for a while. Unfortunately, it seems to be hidden, so people haven't really grasped how powerful Power Query is. Power Query works really well with folders and subfolders, which means you can then organize your files really, really well so you can track things down. So we're going to start and import the 2015 folder in the data here. And I'm going to copy this 2016 one in there later. And then we'll see how seamlessly it updates. So initially, we're going to work with this data folder. Okay, so folders and subfolders, basically everything gets, if you've got a subfolder in a folder and you bring the higher level folder in, it's going to bring in all of the subfolders as well with all of the the entries in there. In terms of Excel files, you can bring in the Excel file and then you can access all of the sheets in the Excel file. Just a reminder, in Power Query, there is no undo. So you can undo things, but there is no undo button. So just be aware, that was something we covered in the first session. Okay, so here we go. We want to import multiple CSV files. So we're going to go to data, which is where Power Query hangs out. It's in the get and transform section. That's where Power Query is. And what we're going to do is click the drop down for get data. And we're going to go from file and then from folder. That's pretty much all we're going to do today in terms of the what we're going to do this a few times. So it's always from file, from folder. It doesn't matter what type of file you're working with. For these ones, these are the individual files, and that does matter which file, but from folder handles all of the file types. So the first step is always get data from file, from folder. Okay, so it's going to go and it's going to give you a navigation screen to go and find your folder. So mine's on my desktop once it finally gets there. So I'm going to go to my desktop. And PQ underscore examples is the one we're going to be using. So I'm going to open that up. And additionally, we're going to be using the data folder. So within the Power Query examples folder, there's a data folder, and that's the one to choose. Click on it and click open. Now, Power Query is going to go and look at that folder, and it's going to, I think it's going to show me all of the files in that folder. Once it gets there, there it is. So that's all of the, now there's actually no files in the data folder itself. These are all in the subfolder of 2015. So they're all the files there. So what we want to do is we want to bring these in. So I'm going to click transform data. So down the bottom here, transform data. And that's going to give me the listing. Now, if that folder that you're bringing in could have other types of files in there or things that you don't want, what you can do is you can do a filter on the extension. So the extension here is .csv. So if we want to make sure we're only bringing in CSVs, then we can basically just uncheck select all and select CSV. Okay, maybe let's use a text filter. So equals. So we're going to do a text filter, and we're going to use equals .csv, and okay. And so that makes sure that we're only going to be looking at CSV files. So for example, if someone throws in an Excel file into that folder, it will get ignored, which is what we want. We're going to do that a little bit more later in the session as well. We're going to be looking for specific file names and specific file types. So you can use that filter option to limit what you're bringing in. Now, when you're working with CSV files or text files, so .txt, they're really, really basic. And so they're really, really easy to work with. And so we can go and click this magic button. Now I'm going to zoom in here a bit, just so we can see the magic button a little bit bigger. So that's it there. It's called Combine Files. It's on the right-hand side of the content column. So it's got two arrows pointing down to a line, and that does magic. So let's see the magic that it does. So I'm going to click it. Excel or Power Query is clunking around in the background. It's looking at all the files and it's giving you a demo. So these files all have a header and then just basically 4 columns. And you can decide which one to look at. I'm just going to look at the first file because they're all the same. And I'm going to click OK. and there's a whole lot of steps that are performed that we didn't really get involved with. It's all happening in the background. They're also on the right-hand side of the left-hand side of the screen as well. We can hide that. So get that out of the way. And there we have it. That is all of our data. It's combined 12 files. So there was 12 monthly files there, and it's put them together. It's added an extra column. So these 4 columns here, the date, the state, account, and amount, they are all in the file. It's also given me the file name. Now, you don't need to keep that, but it's sort of told you what the file was. Notice that it's in alphabetical order. So when you're bringing in files, it does look at the file name and use that to sort of generate the sequence. So we're starting with April because it's the letter A. We can filter this. Sorry, it's not filter it. We can sort it. So if you click the drop down on the date column, also notice it's all changed the types. I'm happy with these types. That's a text. That's a number. I might change this one because it's an amount. I might just change this to currency. When you do that, this little dialog pops up. Basically, back here somewhere, this step here, change type, that was the step that changed the entries, these data types on the columns. So when you change one straight away, it says, well, do you want me to change that change type step to include the one that you're changing? So to be honest, it really makes very little difference whether you click replace the current step or add a new step. Don't get cut up over it at all. You can just say add a new step, and it just adds change type and with a 1 on it. These names in the applied steps have to be unique. So it's always going to create a number on the end if you've already got a name that already exists there. The name it's given the query is data, which is the name of the folder. You could, for example, put a Q in front of that to say it's like a query. You can rename it totally if you want. So that's up to you. Okay, so that is pretty much ready to import. I'm happy to leave that source name in there, which is basically the file name, and we're good to go. So when I click close and load, it's going to create a brand new sheet. It's going to be called Q data, and in that sheet is all of the data from and starting in April. This is actually, I think it's a calendar year. So let's go back into it, and I'm going to sort it. So I'm going to double click on the Q data. So once you've created the query, you can go and edit it. It's up to you. So if you need to add an extra column, take a column out, whatever you want to do, you can go back into it and edit it. So I'm going to double click on the name on the right-hand side, and we'll go back in and we can edit it. And I'm going to sort by the date. So I'll sort ascending. So it is a calendar year. So it's going from January. So there we go. And I'm going to go close and load. And so now the list is sorted. It's got 2015 data in there, all the way down to 400 and odd rows there. Now, this is the cool part. I'm going to go back and I'll show you the folder here. So this is the folder we just worked with. So 2015 is in there. I'm going to copy 2016, copy that. So that's another folder, and just drop that into this data folder. Okay, so I'm just in Explorer doing this. This is not Excel. This is just in Explorer. And basically I copied the 2016 folder into the data folder. So here we go. Let's move this out of the way again. When I refresh this, we're going to go from 400 odd rows to more rows. So here we go, right click, refresh. 720 rows, there we go. So if I scroll down to the bottom now, I think there was only 8 months worth of data in the 2016 one. So it goes down to August 2016 now. And that is really, really powerful. So that means you can set up your folder structure. You can drop in whether you're doing monthly, weekly, daily reports. You can just drop another file in there that's maybe a dump from your system, and it'll automatically update. Power Query can access a lot of systems directly, by the way, but obviously trying to demonstrate that is really hard because everyone has different systems. So CSV files are sort of the lowest common denominator in that pretty much every system will dump into a CSV file. And so you can access all of your data through CSVs. And so you can just drop those files into these folders and automatically update with just a single refresh. If you do have any questions or queries, feel free to use the chat screen. If you want me to go over something, or if you want to ask a specific question as well. Just be aware when you're using a query, especially when you're using multiple files, the assumption is that all of the files are the same layout. So they have to have the same column layout. They can have different number of rows. That's okay, but they do need to have the same column layout. That's an important feature. You can handle situations where files are different, okay, but it's more complex. If you can get the files all the same in terms of the structure, then everything works really seamlessly. Okay, so that's what this assumption is. So for example, if someone saved a CSV file into this folder that was a different layout, it could affect your query and cause errors. Okay, not a big deal because you can track it down and you just take it out of the folder or rename it or just move it. But just be aware that if it is assuming that all of these files are the same layout. And that by layout, I mean column structure. Again, you can have different number of rows in there. That's all good. Power Query handles that, but it is assuming the same layout. Now, have a look. I've kept the source name here. Now, what I wanted to show you is sometimes maybe that file name might have some data in it that is not in the data. For example, in our case, we've got the date, which is good, but maybe we didn't. Maybe the date wasn't included in your data because it's got the date in the file name. So if that's the situation, then what we can do is we can actually do some text manipulation to sort of convert that into a date. So let's see how we can do that. Now, a cool thing we can do with a query is we can duplicate it. So this is our first one. So I'm going to right click on the query. So I'm on the right-hand side of the screen here. It's in the queries and connections. This is called a task pane. So the sections that pop up on the right-hand side of the screen are called task panes. Okay, right click. I'm going to duplicate it. So right click on the Q data one, duplicate it, or it might just be called data. And so that creates an exact copy of that same query. So it has all of the steps involved. Now, what I wanted to show you is how we can manipulate this column. Let's zoom in again. So that we can convert this text into a date. So let's see what we can do. Now, there's a few ways to do this. So here we go. Right click on the column. So the source name column. I'm going to split the column. So I'm going to use a delimiter. So a delimiter is just a character that sort of separates the sections. So by delimiter. Now I'm going to use the full stop because I don't want the CSV part of the source name. So I'm going to just go into the custom and use the full stop. So I've just typed that into there. It's pretty powerful. You can just do the leftmost, the rightmost, or each one. I've only got one full stop in here, so it doesn't really matter which one I use of those, but depending on what you're splitting, then these can be really, really useful. And click OK. So that's it. So custom, full stop, OK. So it's going to create another column. The full stop disappears because it's a delimiter. So that means it's separating two sections, basically. And so the name of the file was Jan_15, and then the CSV was the suffix on the end, which was describing the file. So it split that out. Now, I don't want that, so I can just right-click on that and say remove, because I want to play with this name now. It will also add the dot 1 and dot 2 to the names, to the column names. Column names have to be unique. Okay, so they have to be different. So you can't have the same column name in your data. If you had, let's say, two dates in there, maybe one was an order date, one was a delivered date or something like that, and it just said date, then when Power Query brings it in, it's going to say date 1, date 2. It won't let you have a duplicated column name. Okay, so we're going to hack this file name here. So it's got Jan_15, and all the rest are like Feb and March, etc. So what we're going to do is I'm going to replace the underscore character with some numbers that will make it look like a date. So we're going to go replace values. So again, always right click on the column header to access all of these entries. I'm going to replace values. And what I'm going to do is replace the underscore character with 1, 20. So what that's going to make it look like is Jan 1, 2015. So it's going to look like a date. And it's going to do it for all of the file names. Now, this does assume that I do have some sort of convention that I'm using on the file names. I highly recommend you use naming conventions and you stick to them, because that simplifies so many things in Power Query. So naming conventions save you a lot of time. And just make sure that you stick to them. If you, for example, throw in an extra space or something like that, you can always go and rename the file and then redo the query. So conventions, naming conventions, really, really powerful. Now, that looks enough like a date that Power Query is going to convert that into the date. So when you click on the little icon, the ABC icon here, you can choose a date, and it's going to convert those text dates into real dates. Now, we're lucky we can check them because we have the real dates in there. So we can sort of scroll down and see where the month changes and see that it's correct. So I'm just going to go close and load, and then you'll see the, I should have probably renamed that to a date as well. So I'm going to go back into that. To rename a column, simple as double clicking the column name and just typing. So I'll double click on the source name and just call that new date, because it has to be unique, and then close and load. Now, I've used that with a date example. Maybe you have some other thing like the department or something else in the name of the file. Again, you can use those sort of text manipulation techniques to extract text, and as I said, use that. In my case, I use the replace values to basically hack a date that Power Query would recognize. Okay, so that is, I might just save at the moment, save as. Unfortunately, I can't share this after the session because it's linked to my folder structure. So I can't really share the file afterwards. I could, but you wouldn't be able to access it. You might be able to look at the queries, but they wouldn't work on your system. There are ways around that. So you can actually create queries that will work with a particular folder structure, but that's sort of a more advanced technique that I might cover in a future session. I'm just looking at some questions here. Yes, you can select the columns you need. I'm bringing in all of my columns here. but you can just delete a column and that will, for example, let's go back into the Q date. And let's say I want to use the new date column, but I don't want to use the date column. I can just click on the date and I can just delete it. And so that's only going to bring in now the new date, which is the one I manufactured with the other 3 columns. Okay, so someone's talking about using sort of July to June files. Okay, now I'm using month-based files, and I've got the date in there. If you're just going to have like a 12 months worth of data and just using July to June, and if you overwrite files and things like that, it's not quite as flexible. I would be okay. What I would do is I would bring in all of the data. So I would be looking at putting in names that are descriptive, and also if you've got dates, have those. When you bring in all the data, you can then filter it. So for example, let's go back to my Q data here, my number 2. And if you only want to bring in, let's say, the last 6 months, what you can do is a date filter. So you can say, well, we want after. I might change that to after and equal to, is after or equal to, let's say July. So you can pick it. It's even got a date picker there. So what I would do is I'd bring in all my data and then filter it and then save it. So I'm going to go here now, and it's only going to bring in everything after the first, oh, I don't want 23 because I'm way back there. So let's say 15, because this is old data that I've got in here. So I'm going to lose January 15 and all the other ones. So it's only going to do after or equal to the 1st of the 7th. And you can use and or. So click OK. And so now when I go close and load, it's only going to start at the 1st of July. So rather than sort of use a static July, June file names, so I'm just answering a question that's in the chat screen, I would prefer to sort of be more descriptive in the file names and the dates, and then to use a filter to only bring in the months that you need. So you might only want the last 12 months, for example. And so you could go, now to change the month, you do need to edit the query. But again, there is an interaction that you can build into Power Query. I'm not covering that today because again, it's an advanced technique, but you can build in interaction so that you can change the cell reference, and then that will handle the filter. So that is possible as well. Someone said that the data did not load from the query. Yeah, I can't really help with if something doesn't work like that. You'd probably just need to start again and go through the steps. Okay, multiple Excel files. So we're on page 7 of the notes. So let's see how we can bring in Excel files. So data, get data, from file, from folder. PQ examples. Actually, we're going to use that. Well, is that the right one? No, I want my desktop one. There we go. We're actually going to use that one this time. So the level up from the data. So it's actually PQ_examples, open. Now, this includes all of the files that are in that folder structure. And so again, we can go transform data. Now, there's a couple of ways to do this. There's an automated way, which I'll show you first, and then there's a formula-based way, which I'll show you second. I'm showing you both because sometimes the automated way doesn't always give you what you want. And so I'll give you the other way, which gives you a little bit more flexibility. So here we go. Here's the automated version. So page 7 of the notes. What we want to do is we only want to bring in the Excel SX files. So I'm going to filter on the extension and just tick .xlsx files. So we've only got 3, which is really good. Now each of these files has sheets, and we want to import the sheets. So what we're going to do is I'll zoom in again. Excuse me. We still have our magic button here, this combine files. So we're going to click that, and that is going to have a look at all of these files. And it's going to give us a sort of a demo of what the files look like. So the first one's got 2014 data in it. By the way, there is a mistake in here, which I'll I'll show you in a minute. What we need to do is click this parameter 2, which is at the top level of what's displayed here. It's on page 8, by the way, of the notes. If you're keeping up in the notes, click OK. Okay, so it's still thinking, it's looking at the files, and it's going to give us another, there we go. So what it's doing, and again, it's got all of this other stuff that it's done in the background, which helps the queries all work together to do what we want to do. I'm going to hide that. Let's click on that arrow. So what we've got the source name, which is the file name. We've got the sheet name. We've got what's called data. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to click on this little icon here in a minute to bring in all of the data. At the moment, it's not the data. It's like the structure of the files. So data 2014 has got January, February, March, April. These are all sheets within the file. It tells you with this kind column. So that's telling you that these are all the sheets in those files. By the way, there's a hidden option. So if there was a hidden file, sorry, I'll start again. If there was a hidden sheet in the file, this would say true. Now, that can be quite useful. So what you can do is, let's say you're bringing a budget together, and maybe you have departments in each of maybe the sheets are departments. And you can give instructions to your managers that if you don't want to do a budget for a particular department, just hide the sheet. So they can right click, hide the sheet. That will come up with true in this hidden column, and you could omit it. You could actually go through and filter out anything that says true. In that way, you're only going to be bringing in the sheets that are visible. Okay. So I said, that's just a technique that you can use. You don't have to. But that's what hidden means. So hidden means the sheet is not visible if you open the Excel file. Okay, so that's that. By the way, the name and the item are the same. They are the sheet name. So let's click our magic button. So this one here, so it's on the data. It's the opposing arrows. So click on that. Okay. This is something where they're trying to get Excel or Microsoft to change. This is always ticked. Use original column name as prefix, which means every column would have data in front of it. So it would be data column 1, data column 2. 99 times out of 100, you untick that. Okay, so we're hoping that that's the default. Eventually, Microsoft will get there. Click OK. I don't think anyone uses it, so it's a pretty redundant option that you have to untick. Okay, this is actually now the rows and the columns within the data. So in the January 14, this is the error that's in there. So these actually, I was really lazy and I just copied the files. So the 2014 and the 2015 file are pretty much the same, but I forgot to update the date. So these should all be 2014. We're going to fix that later. Okay, so we're just going to bring this in as it is. Okay, so I don't really need for this, what we're doing here, I don't need the source name or the name. So I'm going to delete those. You can use either right click it and remove, or I'm going to press delete on the keyboard. All gone. Going to scroll over here. I don't need the item and the hidden all the way across. So again, delete. In general, and I mentioned this in the first session last week, try and avoid bringing in columns you don't need. So it's easy to delete them. It's also easy to reinstate them if you change your mind, because there'll be a delete column step on the right-hand side here. So all of these steps are building up as we're doing it. I went into more detail on that in the first session, but you can actually go back to the original at any point. So this takes us back to the listing, and then you can see the filter. So each of these steps sort of takes you through something that happens. Some of these are ones that you didn't do. It's all part of stuff that's happened in the background. Okay, so that's where we're at. I want to keep these headings here, so I want to use that as the heading. So I'm going to go home and use first row as headers. Now, when we scroll down, these are the headers from the other sheets. Now, when we did the CSV files, Excel automatically handled that. But in this case, you've got to manually get rid of these. Okay, so if we go to the filter for the date, if we scroll right to the bottom, there is the word date. So just untick it, and that will remove all of the header rows. So now I can scroll down and all of the header rows are gone. That's pretty much it. I might just, this is at the moment, these are ABC. So I might make that just a whole number. I might make this one a currency. So you just click on the little icon and change the type. Again, just going over something that I covered last week, this is not a format. This is a database concept where a column is a data type, which means that everything in that column should be the same data type. And so the dollars, even though it's got the dollar sign there and it's got some sort of formatting here, it's not a formatting thing. It's a data type thing. It's making sure that the column has the same data in it. And this is a date, so let's change that. Okay, ABC is cool. That's text for the state. Okay, we're good to go. So I'm going to go close and load. So that's the automated way of doing it. Let's have a look. So on page 9 of the notes, let's do the same thing. This time we're going to correct the date, and we're going to use a sort of I'll say a manual way to do it. It just means we're going to use a formula to do it. So same steps: data, get data from file, from folder. Again, we're going to be using, make sure I've got the right one, desktop. Yep, PQ examples as the folder. So the top level folder. Again, transform data. So these steps are the same. This one is where things change. Oh, sorry, this one's going to be the same. I'm going to filter out the other files. So extension, click the drop down and only bring in the, just bring in the XLSX files. There we go. Now, this is the difference. What we did was we clicked on that content, combine, let's zoom in again. We clicked on this combine files icon. I'm going to show you another way to do this, and it requires adding a column. So even though this is like just a listing of sheets, you can still add a column to it. So custom column. Now the formula that I'm going to use is towards the bottom of page 9 in the notes. I'm not going to worry about changing the column name. Here it is, Excel. Now you can see this is called IntelliSense, where they're trying to help you. Now, this is, okay, how can I put this? It's a little bit of a bug in terms of how this works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in a W. Now that is what I want, Excel workbook. So if you click on it, it's all good. This formula is case sensitive. And so it has to be a capital E and a capital W. What I'll show you is the dumb part of it. So let's say I go back here and go EXL full stop, right? Full stop. Try it again. So this is what I want, but look what happens when I click it. Notice that it's put Excel workbook in there. It's put the Excel in there twice. I don't know why. It's just a little bit buggy. All you need to do, and I'll do it again. Now I'm going to type it in lowercase, but it's because I'm going to use the IntelliSense. I'm not going to press the full stop. Don't press the full stop, basically. Press the W, and that brings up Excel workbook. You can then click on that or hit the tab key, and that will bring it in. You can type it as well, but if you type it, you got to make sure you go capital E Excel dot capital W workbook. Okay, open bracket. And then content is one of the options. Double click on that and close the bracket. So that's it on page 9. You can type it all if you want. I tend to use the double clicking to put the entries in there. Okay, so just be aware when you put that, when you use the full stop, and the entry goes in, it's not often what you want. You have to go and edit that entry. If you don't use the full stop, so you just type in Excel W for workbook, you can then use the IntelliSense to bring it in. I know it's not as it should be. I think they are working on it to try and fix it. It's something you have to get used to. This language is called the M language. It's like a combination of VBA and so macros and Excel's formulas and functions. So you can do basic calculations in here. And this one here is like a function. It's bringing in all of the content from a workbook. You'll get to know some of these M language names. Probably a good idea to keep a track of them, maybe, so you can learn them. But they're not like VBA and they're not like Excel functions, but they're sort of a combination of them. Click OK. So that just brings in a custom column because I didn't change the name, and it's also got that those double-headed arrows. So the arrow going one way and the arrow going the other way. So I'm going to click on that. And again, it's got this use original name, column name. We untick that, get frustrated with this one and click OK. And there we are. So this is very, very similar to what we had before. It's got the sheet, it's got the hidden. And then we're going to use this attributes column, which has got record in it at the moment. Or hang on, is there a data? Oh, data, sorry, data, not that one. So we're going to go to the data column, and it's got that same icon, and we're going to use that one. So this is on page 10 of the notes. This time it remembers that we don't want it. When you do it the second time, it remembers you don't need it. So click OK. Now this looks remarkably like what we had before. It's got a few other different things in there, like the folder path, etc. So what I'm going to do is delete the columns on the left-hand side up to the name.1. I'm going to keep name.1 because I'm going to do that hack and fix the date on this. And then on the other side, we don't need item to hidden. Delete those. Now, a word of warning. If we deleted the name, we could promote what's called promote the headers. We could use the first row as the header. When we've got this type of structure where this now has an entry, so this is like an entry there, this could change. And so when you promote the headers, it's going to use whatever name is in here as a header. Now, for future queries, that could be problematic because your year could change, your month could change. The problem is when you name the columns, it's going to use those names in your data for the basically all of the steps that follow. So you can sort of break a query if you sort of promote the headers here because this particular cell could change. The other cells are good, but this cell is variable. And so in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to name this date. I'm not going to name this column because I'm going to delete it in a minute. Actually, I can delete it now because that date is wrong. And I'm going to then call this, so I'm just double clicking here and I'm just renaming these manually. Remember, you only have to do this once you create the query. So it's not a big deal. You only do this because we're just going to rerun the query. Okay, so now I'm going to go here and just remove state. So that gets rid of our headers. And now I'm going to do that same thing that I did before. I'm going to use replace values and the underscore with 1,20. And that will get all of our dates correct. So change the type to a date. I'll change that to text, change this to a whole number, and change this to a currency. Okay, so just click on the icon and select the one that makes the most sense for the data types. And we're done. So back to home, close and load. And now we have the correct dates in there from 2014 onwards. Okay, so that's sort of all of the importing I wanted to cover. Oh no, we do have another one. Just going through my notes here. So we're on page 11 and we're going to look at merging tables. So in this file, I've got a couple of tables. So this is an old GL. So this account number is going to be updated. We're going to change GLs and we're going to change the account number. And here's a mapping table of the old to the new. Now, all Excel people would be saying, okay, we just need to do a VLOOKUP here, or an XLOOKUP if you've got XLOOKUP. Yes, that's right, but you could. But if you're working with large data sets, VLOOKUP and XLOOKUP can be a bit slow. And by large data sets, I mean like 500,000 rows. So I had an example where I needed to do a conversion. I had 500,000 rows to work with. I had to go at VLOOKUP and it just died. So Power Query, however, did it pretty much instantaneously. It did take a little bit because it was working with 500,000 rows, but let's see how to do it. So what we're going to do is we're going to import this table as a query, but we're not going to export it. We're just going to import it and it's going to sit as what's called a connection only query. So here we go. I'm going to click inside the table and I'm going to go to data and then from table or range. Now, all I'm going to do is put a Q in front of the name on the right-hand side here. I'll make it a bit bigger as well. Okay, I'm just going to put a Q on the front there just so I know it's a query. I use a name for my tables with the prefix of TBL. So that table was a formatted table, which I covered a couple of weeks ago, and it's got a TBL prefix. You have to have a formatted table to import into Power Query. Now, I don't know why, but when you've got an Excel table with a date, it always makes a date time. I have no idea why, but I'm just going to switch that to a date. And this is that same message. Do you want to replace it? Which I will. So it's just replacing the change type that it's just done. Okay, so that's all I want, but we're going to do something we haven't done before. I'm going to click the drop down for close and load. There's a drop down. And what we want is close and load to. So the second option. This lets you just bring the data in and basically put it into memory, which is as a connection. So only create connection. So it's importing the data into memory as a query and also creating the table, but it's not going to output it into a sheet. So it's called a connection only query. You usually do this when you're bringing the tables together and then you want to do a single output, which is what we're going to do. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing with this table here for the mapping table, from table or range. So again, click inside the table, from table or range. I'm just going to put a Q again in front of the query, just so I know it's different. This one, I don't need to do anything to the data. I'm just going to leave it like that. And again, click the drop down, close and load to. Okay, connection only again. So 2 separate connection only queries. Click OK. And now I'm going to combine them. So I'm going to go to get data, and there's a combine queries called merge. Now I want to combine the Q table the old GL with the Q table convert. So that's the main table. This is like the lookup table down the bottom here. So what I want to look up is the account column and the old column. So the account column has the old account numbers, and then the old account here, as you can see, the columns don't need to be named the same, but they do have to have the same entries in them, obviously. And this one down the bottom needs to be unique. So there's only a single 1, 2, 3, 4 in this listing, whereas up in the top one, there can be multiple 1, 2, 3, 4s. So this is like a lookup, basically. It's going to look up, well, the next step when I go, okay, it creates a query, and there's going to be a column on the end when it opens with QBL. So that's the convert table. And what we're going to do is click on those. Again, I'll zoom in. That magic button here of the 2 arrows, and again, untick use original column. And I only want to bring in, well, I'll actually bring in both, so you can see that it's bringing both in. So that's the old account number, which should be exactly the same as the account number here. And then we've got the new account number. So it's looking up the old account number to bring in the new one. So for example, we could delete that old one because it's already there. And there you go. So there's the new account number. And close and load. Now, if you're working with hundreds of thousands of rows, this will be quicker than using something like VLOOKUP or HLOOKUP, or sorry, XLOOKUP. There we go. So there's the new account number on the end there. All good. We'll finish off. I think we're finishing off with, yep. We're going to extract some information from the header rows. Oh, yeah, someone mentioned about the format. That's a good point. When you are merging the columns, let's go back and look at these 2. So these are the 2 connection only. Notice it says connection only on the right-hand side of the screen here. So let's go look at the GL first. It's a good point to bring up. Okay, notice how the account is a 1, 2, 3 number, the data type of the account. So it's not a formatting thing, it's a type. So the account is a 1, 2, 3 data type for that column. Let's close, and we can actually access the other queries here. So what was the other one? The convert. So let's click on that. Notice the old is also a 1, 2, 3 data type. If the data types are different, then the merge might not work. Okay, so just be aware. So for example, if this was an ABC, can I break it? Let's try. So let's make this text. So I'm going to change the, replace the current. Okay, so this old column now is ABC. That is different to the 1, 2, 3. Which is like an integer on the other column. So let's go back to our merge. I don't know if this is going to break it or not. So looks like it's still handling it. Oh, no, look. See how these are all null now. So it's not picking it up. And that's because this account type or this data type is different between the two columns. So when you're merging a column, the name of the column can be different, but the data type needs to be identical. Okay, so you can see here that these are all nulls now. So I've lost my new account. If I go back to my convert and change that back to a whole number and replace again. Okay, that's back to the 1, 2, 3. Notice it does put them on different sides as well, so which is like Excel. So let's go back to our merge. And there we go, and we've got the numbers back. So thanks for asking that question. The data type is important when you are merging. Okay, let's look at how we're going to extract some data from a header. Ooh, yeah, many-to-many is a problem that is above my pay grade. Basically, when you're looking up a table, that lookup table has to be unique in terms of the entries in there. That's actually easy to fix. You can remove duplicates as one of the options in Power Query. But basically, if you've got a many-to-many, that's really complicated, and I'll pass on that. The lookup table should be unique in the entry that's being looked up. Okay, so here we go. We're going to grab the header out of some files, the header section. So from get data, from file, from folder, we might go over time a little bit here. If there's a blank in the account column, you'll probably get a null entry pop up. You may get an error. Just depends on, yeah, I'm not sure if you'll get an error or a null. Be one of those. Probably a null. Because we had sort of nulls in that entry, I reckon it won't give you an error. It'll give you a null response if you've got a blank in the account column. Okay, so I'm going to extract from PQ examples. Oh, as I mentioned, I might go over time now by a couple of minutes. I'm going to keep going. If you need to leave, that's cool. But I will get this finished. Okay, so that's what we're going to be looking at. We only want, where are they? These CSV underscores. There's 4 of them. So transform data. And we're going to use our filter again. So remember, if you filter, that's limiting what comes in to the query. And also when you're filtering in the query window, it limits what's output. So I'm going to make sure we only bring in text filters. So on the name, and I'm going to go begins with, and I'm going to go CSV, so capital CSV underscore. Capital CSV underscore. Okay, so I'm going to ignore, so this time I'm using the name, not the extension, to cut down the number of files that we're working with. Because these are CSVs, we can use, I'll zoom in again, we can use this magic button here to join everything together, combine the files. Okay, so there's the header section. So we've got a company and we've got a state. They are not in columns, they're in separate entries. So we need to capture those and I'll show you how to do that. So just click OK. So we're going to use, we're going to go to add column again. I'll hide all this. So again, you can't do the promote headers at the moment. So because of the entries, and we want to capture this stuff at the moment as well. So we're going to go add column. We're going to go custom column. And the first one is going to be a company. So you can type in company for the column name. And we're going to, again, this is sort of a combination of macros and Excel functions. It's case sensitive, which is really frustrating. If, where are we? We're in column 1. So double click column 1. So if column 1 equals quotation marks, company, space. So there can be a space there as well. Then we want to bring in column 2. So I'll just move this down. So if column 1 has company, we want to capture what the company name is, which at the moment is ABC. So else, null. So as I mentioned, this is sort of like a combination of VBA, macros, and Excel's functions. We've got a tick down the bottom, which means we're good to go. So click OK. And when you are referring to a column, you need to put them in square brackets. I'm double clicking on those columns on the right-hand side to get those names in. And quotation marks are needed around any text. As I mentioned, I've got another couple of minutes to go, which I'll keep going. If you need to leave, that's cool. You can jump on the video when it gets sent. Okay, so there's company. That's good. Pretty much exactly the same technique to extract the state. So custom column, give it this time, it's called state. And if column 1 equals, in quotation marks, state, space, then bring in column 2, else null. Null is a keyword, by the way. It's like a blank. That's what you need to sort of put there instead of just having an empty cell. Just use the word null. It's always in lowercase as well. Now, this is a technique we used, I showed you in the first session last week. What I'm going to do is select both of these columns, right-click, fill down. So right-click on the header, fill down. And there we go. We've populated all of those columns with the entries. And so now I can go back here. I'm going to delete the source name, delete. I'm going to delete the rows here, which is on our home. Oh, no, don't do that. Undo. Sorry, I clicked the wrong button. Remove rows we want to do. Remove top rows. 3. Yeah, I should mention there is no undo, but you can just click this little red X to remove anything. Again, I covered that in the first session more so. Again, we can't really promote the headers here, so I'm going to call this date, an account, and amount. And then we've already got company and state there, so then we can delete this row. Remove rows 1. Oh, what did I do then? I did something, undo that. Remove rows, remove top rows. 1. Now we will have the headings and all that stuff in here as well. So what we can do, what's the easy way to do it? We go to the account and get rid of the blanks and no, that's not going to work. Let's try maybe on the date column. Yep, get rid of the blanks, the company, date, and state. This is all of the other headings that are coming through from the other files. So we're making sure we remove that. There is another way to do that. Let's show you how to do that. If you change this type, now have a look here. We've got company, state, and then a blank, and then date. So this is the next file. If you change the date to a date, you'll get errors or nulls in the rest of the entries because you can't convert text into a date, well, in this case. So what you can do, and notice that it's gone red here. So what you can do is you can go here and say remove, not remove empty, right click and say remove errors. And because you've sort of created the error, you can remove it. And then we don't want the nulls in there. So we can untick null. And there we go. So that's basically ready to go. You might want to make the amount a currency and the account a number. Everything else is okay. And close and load. So apologies for going over time there. I was taking my time, so I didn't want to rush And there we go. So there is the data, and we've captured the company and the state. So you can see there's different states, and we've got different companies there as well. So, but they were in the header, they weren't in the columns, but we've managed to capture them into the columns for each of those 4 files. Okay, Power Query, incredibly powerful. This is just scratching the surface of what it can do. But as you can see, it simplifies bringing together files, really good for things like budgets, when you're trying to bring budgets together, for reports, dashboards. If you're trying to get a whole lot of files together, Power Query is the way to go. And then you can, as you do, cleanse it as you sort of bring it in. Okay, I don't think I've got any questions that I didn't handle there, so that's all good. So I'll wrap it up. I have got some more webinars coming out next month. I'm going to be doing a budget challenge for the free session, and then I'll be doing other budgets, paid sessions next month. So keep an eye out for that. But otherwise, have a great day. It's the end of the month. Who can believe that? The January's already gone. So yeah, hopefully see you online next month, and have a great day. Thanks very much.